Hi, everybody. I'm back. I'm going back to reading from my book, and I want to let everyone know that this is the corrected edition, meaning that I went back and I made corrections to my manuscript so that it would sound better than it did before. So I'm really excited about finally getting down to starting to read chapter 4. I got my drink. So, yeah. All right. So, apparently this one is going to be complete in 14 minutes. Though, maybe a little more. All right. Chapter 4. When the two detectives left, Barbara sat back in her chair and thought over what they had told her. The idea that someone had taken her car, most likely the one that had tried to kill her and had killed Misty, and tampered with it, made her feel as though nothing in her life for now was in her control. She phoned the store and Sally answered on the second ring. "Book Nook, where we have what you want to read. This is Sally." "Sally, this is Barbara." Barbara cut in. "Barbara, what's going on?" "Someone took my car and cut through it with a laser," she reported, making Sally gasp in shock. "Yeah, that's pretty much how I felt hearing it." "So what's going to happen now?" "I don't know," Barbara said. "I guess they'll give me something to give to my insurance company. I'm going to rent a car today. I need my wheels." "Make sure it isn't one of those shady rental companies." "Don't worry, I'll make sure," Barbara said, then hung up. The only one that anyone had ever used, Smith's Car Rental, had no available cars. So Barbara used one of the more well-known rental companies called Ace Car Rental. They had a solid 5-star rating and 7 available vehicles. None of them was the same as her Mercedes, but she couldn't afford to be picky. She took a cab to their lot and walked in. A woman greeted her the moment the door closed behind her. She had a pleasant smile, and her clothes looked neat and clean. Neat and clean are the words that her mother would have used for anyone that she judged, which turned out to be anyone within her line of sight. "May I help you?" she asked Barbara. "My name is Barbara Market," she said. "I came here to rent a car." "Of course," she said. "My name is Tamara Wills, and we've been expecting you." She walked over to the desk, Barbara fallen behind, and she started to type on the large computer that her brother would have screamed at if he had seen it. Her brother was a computer repairer and always talked her ear off about whatever he was working on. She repaid it by talking his ear off about what she had been doing. "We have a 2010 Toyota Prius, just returned and clean, and a Ford Mustang." "I thought you had 7 of them." "We did, but 5 were rented already," she answered. "I'll take the Prius," she said, showing the woman her license. 10 minutes later, she was off the lot in her new car. "So it looks like a firebug went through the back door," Walter Holder told the detectives when they walked in. "But the lock wasn't broken in the back," Miller pointed out. "He probably had a key," he said. "Which he probably got from the deceased," Hawk supplied, and Walter nodded. "Why didn't the alarm go off?" Miller asked. "That's the odd thing," Walter said. "The only thing I can think of was that he had the code, which should be impossible, as probably the owners were the only ones that had it." "So this looks like an inside job," Miller reasoned. "Or a former employee was given it before things went south," Walter said, shaking his head. So the odd thing is that only certain books were doused with gasoline. He didn't target all of them. "Why would our firebug only target certain books?" Hawk said. "This whole thing doesn't make a bit of sense." "Do firebugs have to make any sense?" Walter asked him. "In my world, they better make some sense," Hawk told him. I will have to talk with the husband about those books. Maybe he could tell me why they might have been targeted." "Well, the funeral is tomorrow, closed casket, so we might be able to get some answers." Sorry. "Well, the funeral is tomorrow, closed casket, so we might be able to get some time to talk to him. And I'm going to be watching," Hawk told him. "Do you think the firebug will be dumb enough to come to her funeral?" Hawk looked at his partner and said, "Oh, I'm counting on it." "I hate wearing black," Sam complained as he closed and locked the door to his car. "I know what you mean," Barbara said. "The last time I wore black was to GoreCon." What I come up with. "What? I went to GoreCon," Barbara repeated. "It's a horror convention." And how many came to see you?" he asked. 800, Barbara answered, and Sam whistled. "I should take you one time." Sam held his hands and said, "I'm not a horror fan. I couldn't even get through it, which scared me for life." Barbara snickered and asked, "How old were you when you read it?" 11. "No wonder," she said, though she snickered again. "Yes, let's make fun of little old me," he said, rolling his eyes. Barbara laughed and said, "Sorry, but I have this image of cute little you reading it." Another eye rolling came. The laughter stopped the moment that Barbara and Sam entered the small church. They hung out in the back, watching people as they filed in. Many people from several book advocacy groups had come to pay their respects. She had called them a couple of days ago, and they had agreed to speak at the event that Sally had organized. Sorry. As the people filed in, Barbara took stock of the church itself. It had been built in the late 19th century as a Baptist church for a growing Baptist population that had mainly settled in the area 20 years prior. Barbara didn't know who had designed the building, but it was on the National Registry of Historical Places. The last sermon was given in the 1980s and was bought 10 years later to serve as a non-denominational church after a $10 million renovation. She had only been past the church several times, but thought they had done an excellent job in the renovation. "It's starting," Sam told her, and Barbara returned to the now. They started it with a couple of hymns, words that Barbara could still remember, and then an urn was brought out and set on the table. Barbara had a feeling that Misty was going to be cremated to keep the family from having to be reminded of how she died. Barbara's husband had been cremated as well, since she didn't think she could handle a closed casket funeral. "I'm not surprised that they cremated her," Sam whispered to her. It was the same for me," Barbara told him, ensuring her tone was low enough not to interrupt this funeral. "So, who died?" he asked her. "My husband," Barbara answered. "He was a stunt driver for one of the large movie studios. He was trained to survive almost anything, but he didn't survive his car flipping 11 times and then bursted into flames." She felt a tear go down her face, and Sam touched her shoulder, comforting her. "Sorry, I shouldn't. Don't worry, it wasn't your fault," she assured him, and returned to the service. As the service continued, Barbara noticed that someone was there that she didn't think would be there. Taylor Lovechild, owner of Dying to Read. He had made it clear to her that he had no intention of having anything to do with her remembrance gathering, but here he was at his most hated rival's funeral. Talk about distasteful and suspicious. "That's Taylor Lovechild," Barbara told Sam. "Why is he here?" "Probably to gloat," Sam answered, wrinkling his nose in disgust. Taylor left through a side door before Chuck Hart reached the pulpit. As he left, she noticed someone else, someone who was taking a very keen interest in Taylor leaving. He left through the same side door that Taylor had used, and Barbara suddenly wanted to see what was going on there. "I'll be back," Barbara whispered, leaving the church as she had entered. As all the characters in her mystery books did, she made her way slowly but saw no sign of the person who had followed him, and she wondered where he was. And then something entered her mind that she hoped that she was wrong about. What if the person who had killed him was the same person who had killed Misty and tried to kill her twice? What if the person who had followed, not killed... No, that is not a mistake of my writing. That's a mistake of me reading it. Sorry, I have it written as follows. What if the person who had followed him was the same person who had killed Misty and tried to kill her twice? Suddenly she heard a loud explosion, making her ears ring. She ran out to see what remained of several cars. Sound brought the mourners out, and they all screamed in shock and surprise. All Barbara could do was watch Taylor burn. However, she doubted he was able to feel anything. "That's Lovechild's car," someone said. A second explosion soon followed the first, and there was more screams from the mourners. Barbara couldn't believe it. Another bookseller was dead. "I'm starting to think that someone has it in for booksellers." Hawk told Miller as the fire department snuffed out the last of the fire. Department... Oh, great. Oh, God. Okay. I will skip that. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not worrying about it. Oh, I need to stop being so rabid. Old, stuffy people getting whacked, Miller said. Something out of a crime novel. And guess who's here, he said, pointing at Barbara, who was again being treated in an ambulance. I guess she's here because of what Mrs. Hart did, he said. I think we should ask a couple of questions. I'll go and talk with Mr. Hart, Miller told him. Hopefully as far away from this smell as possible. Hawk nodded and Miller headed for a small group of mourners. So, another one of your rivals is dead, Hawk told Barbara as he approached her. Sir, she can't hear you, the paramedic told him. How long will she be unable to hear, he asked. Don't know, was the answer. We're taking her to the hospital to be checked out. He nodded and watched as she was loaded into the back, and then it drove away. Guess we'll never find out, Miller told him, watching the ambulance leave. I think I know someone who might know why she was even here, he told him, pointing to the man Barbara had been with. Well, then, let's ask him. They approached him, and Hawk remembered seeing him when he visited Mrs. Market's shop the first time around. Can I ask you a few questions? Miller asked him. No problem, he said. Your name? Hawk answered. Sam Holtz, he answered. And you work for Mrs. Market? Hawk verified, and Sam nodded. So why did she leave the service? To see if she could find out who had followed Taylor out of the church, he said. I didn't think that was a good idea, but I didn't try and stop her. Because of what happened before, Miller reasoned, and Sam nodded. And then I heard the explosion and found Barbara bleeding and Taylor's car on fire. Do you know why Mr. Lovechild might have been at the funeral? Miller asked. We know she didn't get along with the other sellers. I don't know, Sam said. Barbara told me she had talked to him about Sally's planned event. He had made it clear that he hated her, and that he wasn't sorry that Mrs. Hart died, and that he wanted nothing to do with her. Still, he was here. Well, I guess we'll never find out, Hawk said. So sad, Sam told him, shaking his head. But I do agree that something isn't right here, and I agree that someone is trying to do everything to erase anything they might have cared for. And how do you figure that out? Look at all the trouble the killer is going through, Sam told him. Misty and Taylor's legacies weren't in what people would consider legacy. It was in their business and what they believed in. Take that away and you erase everything they worked for. So, can you think of anything Mr. Lovechild did that might have made him a target? Well, I doubt it was his bubbling personality, Sam said. And he, like all the booksellers, was against many things. I'm not in the loop like Barbara is, but she made sure that I knew what was going on. And that tells us nothing, Miller said. What does that even mean? I think you both already know, Sam answered. Well, I need to get going. I have Barbara's kittens to feed and want to get out of here. The smell of death is making me sick. He then climbed in his car and drove away. Barbara was glad to get back home after the explosive funeral and the hospital visit. The whole thing had rattled her nerves. There was now 2 dead booksellers, and she had a funny feeling that all of this was connected by one thing, the fight against book bans. She found her cats eating, and it looked as though Sam had fed them. She was glad about that. She poured herself something to drink and used that to wash down the medication that the doctor had given her. It would be 2 days before she could hear anything again. She typed the website for a database of groups that wanted to end easy access to any book that someone wanted. There was some nasty groups like Moms for Liberty. That was the loudest of all voices that had ever spoken in school board meetings and supported their kind of candidates. Several smaller groups did the same thing, but needed to be more well known than the first. Some of the most notable ones were Parents Against Pornography and Parents Against Book Lovers. The last one confused confused more than half the authors out there who had to put up with PAP and PAB members. PAB members were among those at the meeting that she went to. She decided to email her agent and ask him a few questions. I just want to know if Taylor Lovechild had gotten any threatening messages or mail, Barbara asked him. And don't try and call me. I can't hear a damn thing. And she sent the email to him and turned off her computer. Barbara had asked Sally to go to the Happy Ending bookstore. However, it was closed with a note that the owner had a doctor's appointment. Frowning, she texted Barbara telling her the owner wasn't inside and the store was closed. Then she headed for Chocolate Dream, one of the only sweet shops in Waterhorse. The whole place, even from 4 doors down, promised escape. She pulled the door open and entered her dreams. The Chocolate Dream was a white shop, and Sally meant it when she said white, with a couple of tables, a longer table for coffee and tea, and under the glass case had all sorts of goodies that made her mouth water. "Hey, Sally," the owner, Patty Milton, said the moment she walked in. "What brings you in?" "I need some chocolate-covered pretzels," said Sally, "and some chocolate bonbons. Barbara is home, and I want to bring her something to cheer her up." "How many?" she asked. 11, she answered, "and half a dozen bonbons." Patty pulled out a white bag and added the 11 pretzels and the 6 bonbons that Sally wanted. As she was ringing her up, she said, "I heard what happened at Misty Hart's funeral." Sally shuddered at those words. Hearing from Sam about what happened had sent chills down her spine. "Don't remind me," she said. "I hope never to see anything like that in my lifetime." "That I agree with," Patty said, "though I will say that nothing that Taylor did warranted that." "I'm going to agree," Sally said, and she paid for the candy and left. "So, who wants to take bets that this killer is expert in making bombs?" Sorry, oh God. Sorry, it's Sam, not Sally. Oh, Lord. Sam said to them after the store had closed for the day. The till was already in the safe, and all three were around the back table talking about what had happened at the funeral. "I know for a fact that he's an expert in bomb making," Sally told him, "and general methods of terrorism. And blowing up someone's car is the mark of a terrorist." Sam saw Daniel shudder. He didn't blame him. Sam knew that he would never forget what he had seen. "So, any idea what we should do next?" Sally asked. "We need to find out who, among the dozens that hated both Misty and Taylor, was an expert in this method of killing. If we don't have a general idea of who's doing this, one of them could end up under one of our cars." "But how do we find out?" "We need to talk to their friends," Sam told them. "We also need to find out if they got bomb threats. However, discovering if the police were ever called would be almost impossible. Sorry. Because we're not police." "Exactly," he said, "and I doubt Detective Hawk will agree to tell us anything about any threats they might have gotten." "I know that he told Barbara things," Sally told him. "He did, but until Barbara recovers, we won't know what was said." "Maybe you could find out," Daniel told him. "I mean, you used to." "I doubt he'll want to talk to me," Sam said. Sally held her hand and said, "What are you talking about, Sam?" "Well, I used to be a police officer in Florida," he confessed. "However, I don't have training to ask people questions." "Neither does Barbara, but she managed it." "Fine, I'll go and talk to him, but don't be surprised when I get nothing out of him." The home that had once been Misty and Chuck Hart's was located in the historical district of Waterhorse. When he moved back from Florida, he was shocked to hear that there was a historical district. He thought Waterhorse was just too small of a town to have one. No cars were in the drive, telling him that Chuck was gone or someone was borrowing his car. Oh, man. However, he walked over and knocked on the door. He waited a couple of moments and then knocked again. The second round of knocks caused the door to open. Looking at the gate didn't give him good feelings. He went back to his car and pulled out his old service revolver that he still had in his name. He then slowly opened the door, keeping the gun down. "Chuck, are you home?" No sounds were coming from the house. Everything was clean with the smell of lemon Lysol filling his senses. Someone had just been in here to clean. "Chuck, this is Sam." And then he heard moaning and followed the sound, moving slowly just in case the person was still in the house. The last thing he needed was someone to get the drop on him. "Chuck," he called out. "In here," he cried, though it wasn't in his usual firm voice. He was hurt. He found Chuck in a large island kitchen. Blood was coming from several wounds on his arm, but nothing on his neck or chest. "What happened?" He pointed behind him, and then he felt a cord going around his neck before he could turn, causing him to drop the gun. However, he was much stronger than his assailant and managed to knock him off balance, and he fell to the floor. Sam grabbed his gun again and pointed at him, glaring at him. He dared the man to try something foolish. "Try something, man, and I'll take you down." The figure snarled at him and then bolted out of the house. "I'm calling for help," he told Chuck. Chuck nodded and Sam called the police. "Don't tell me your boss is away and you decide to play cop," Hawk told Sam. "I was a police officer," Sam corrected him. "You can call the Orange County Police Department. They have me on file." "Don't worry, we will," he said, and Hawk watched as Chuck was led away. "So why did you come here?" "I was trying to find out what Mr. Hart told Barbara during their meeting," Sam answered. "It reminded me of something I read about as an officer. Thought the perp might have moved up here from Florida." "And why are you now selling books?" Sam crossed his arms and Hawk saw that he looked at him like the question was stupid. "Because I have the right to work where I want," he answered, "just like you have the right not to ask the right questions. You both should be asking why Mr. Hart allowed someone dressed in black to get in, and I think dear Mr. Hart has all those answers. You stick to selling books and leave the work to us." Sam rolled his eyes. "Can I go?" he asked them. "Of course," Miller said, and they watched him leave. "Everything about this just seems too odd," Hawk told him. "If I left the department, I would be doing something else to keep my skills sharp." "That's you," Miller told him. "Sometimes we just want to get away. My brother's the same." "Your brother? What did he do?" "Worked for the feds," he answered. "Saw way too much to be mentally stable, so he left, killed himself a month later." "Sorry about that." "Thanks," Miller said, glad that he cared. "Let's find out what's going on in there." And they headed for the house. "You could have died," Daniel told Sam. "I'm going to agree," Sally said, "though what you told us looks like someone was expecting someone to come in. And I bet that it was probably Barbara that the perp thought was coming through. The whole house smelled like it had just been cleaned." "That's odd. He's supposed to be mourning and he cleans." "Might have a maid," Daniel reasoned. "Might, but I'll talk to Barbara when she returns." "Sounds like a good idea." "So our perp has made his first mistake," Detective Hawk told Miller. "Thought a certain person was going to come in. I should pay Miss Market another visit. Might have left something on her answering machine that she didn't get. And because she can't hear anything, she has no idea that's even there," Miller reasoned, and Hawk nodded. "I hope that's the case," Hawk added to him. "Me too, because I want to close this case finally," Miller said, yawning. "Hard night last night?" he asked. "My little girl has chicken pox, which kept me up most of the night." "Sorry about that," he said. Miller held up his hand and said, "Don't worry, it's not like you gave her the pox." Barbara was surprised to find Detective Hawk at her front door. April, Sally's sister, told her that she would find out what the detective wanted. She read her book, a thriller with a name that she couldn't pronounce, but was good, and then April showed her a piece of paper. It read, "Barbara, the detective wants to find out if there are any messages that Mr. Hart sent you that you didn't get. Sam was attacked at Mr. Hart's home, and we believe that someone was expecting you, but instead got Sam." Barbara nodded, scared at what she had read. Even though she had wanted her friends to help her, the fact that Sam had gotten hurt made her wonder if getting them involved had been a good idea. When he was gone, April changed her bandages. Barbara couldn't wait to be able to hear again. "I'll make dinner," April wrote to her. "Thanks," Barbara said to her, and April returned to the kitchen. The following day, Barbara went to the doctor to check her ears. He removed the bandages and checked each ear out. He then snapped his fingers, and Barbara was happy to report that she could hear it. "Well, you might be able to hear it, but you won't be able to be around loud noises. Just tell people to keep their voices down for the next month. Then everything will be back to normal." "Thanks," she said, and she left the office. When she returned to her shop, she found it quiet. She typed a note telling customers they had to keep their voices down, and then went to her office to find Sally printing something out. The bandages are gone, she said. Voice down. Down, she told Sally, who nodded. This whole month is going to suck. I can't hear people because they have to keep their voices down, and I doubt that many people are going to listen. I'll make sure they do. Thanks, she said, and then Sally left her office. She texted her agent telling her she was all right, and then texted her daughter. She could tell from her daughter's reply that she had been worried about her. She smiled at that image. It was nice for someone to be worried about her. I can't believe that you're trying to solve a mystery, she wrote after Barbara told her what had happened. I thought writing them was enough. Most of the time, but still, I can't get it out of my mind that there's some hidden meaning behind both murders. So both of them sold books. I don't get why you can't allow the police to find out who did it. Honestly, an old woman kills herself because this man killed her son. I owe it to her memory to try and find out who did this. And Chuck, Missy's husband, almost died. The man managed to get into his house and try and kill him, and then tried to kill Sam. This is personal, honey, and you know what happens when I take things personally. Fine, Mother, she wrote. So why do you think the killer is doing this? To erase legacy, Barbara answered, using the same reason that she gave Detective Hawk. And I thought it was killing them and burning down their business. Now it's trying to kill members of the deceased family. Glad I'm living in Chicago, she said, and I want you to stay there, Barbara said. No matter what happens, don't do it if someone calls you and asks you to come here. I won't, she promised. Good, now tell me how things have been with you. How long before the results come back? Hawk asked Miller about those stab wounds. A couple of days, he answered. We had to send it off to a larger lab than we have. Great, he muttered. He sometimes forgot that Waterhorse was a small town. They might have gotten several new things and technology, but they were still small. May I ask something? Miller said, looking at Hawk. Is it personal? He asked. Of course not, he said, defending himself. You know I don't ask personal questions. Hawk gave him a look that told Miller he didn't believe him. So, what do you want to know? How does it feel to know that someone was right and it happens to be an author, he joked. I'm not answering that, Hawk told him. Of course not, Miller said, crossing his arms and grinning. Let's just get back to doing the work we know, solving crimes. Yeah, because we're doing such a great job, Miller said. We have one owner that has been attacked twice. A former officer has been mistaken for the victim. We have a widower that almost died. We have one blown-up former bookseller. One burned-down business. One dead woman that burned to death in her car. One car in a big pond. And a possible connection to 3 different hate groups that targeted them before their deaths. And your point? I think we should allow Miss Margaret to help us, he said. I mean, this man is targeting people in her community. No, Hawk said, his voice firm. And why not? Want the captain to demote us, he asked. Anyway, we can solve this much better than she could. Let's hope you're right. Alright, that is the end of chapter 4. I laughed a couple times. It's like, yeah, we're just doing so well. Oh, man. But, yes, there was a couple of mistakes, but I'm not going back to fixing it. I've already fixed it. My brother says, you need to stop being so rabid about this. I was like, oh, I'm sorry, Stephen. I'm sorry, Stephen. But yes, yeah, so that's why the novella that I'm currently proofreading right now, I'm being really rabid about making sure that it is done correctly so I don't have to go through this when the 17th rolls around. So anyways, yeah, so with the Peachy Death, I am going to be reading it on my Kindle because for right now I can't afford to buy it as a physical, but I will try to buy 1 copy on the 4th to give to the library. So that's it for the video. I'm going to see what my schedule is for this week coming up, and I will try to read chapter 5. So I'll see you guys around. Bye.